JT, let's start with the topic of Will Levis and the topic of timing. A really interesting article from Nate Tice over with Yahoo Sports came out this morning. He has alluded to on his Twitter account the past couple of days that he has been studying Will Levis and the Titans offense last year and writing this article on what Will Levis's year 2 could potentially look like. And he does, as he always does, Nate is very, very good at this, a really good job doing a sober, in-depth, deep dive into not just the player, but the footage, the tape study, examples of the things that he's talking about on tape and breaking down as a former quarterback himself, Nate, breaking down what he's seeing, what he's doing, what he needs to improve, and what he's very good at. And he's complimentary along all of the typical lines, right? He's got an incredible arm. He's more mobile than people give him credit for. He's a gamer. He's not afraid to shoot downfield regularly. He's more accurate than people give him credit for, all of these things. But the topic that was in that, and I've heard a couple of times that I don't think we've touched on really in name on this show that I want to talk about today, is timing. And the way that last year, and you don't have to be a genius, you don't have to be a pro level scout to have seen this last year, there were times that Will Levis stood in the pocket and pretty clearly held on to the ball a tick or 2 ticks longer than he should have. A little bit late on a throw, not letting it rip quite on time. And many times he made up for that because he's got a stupid arm. He's got outrageous arm arrogance. It's wicked how fast he can put the ball on you. There was a clip that Nate Tice put out in his film study from the Tampa Bay game where it was a chig route where he sits down right in the middle of the field, right across the end zone line. Levis sees him, fires it in there, really tight window at a jillion billion miles an hour. It basically blows Chig's hands clean off of his arms, and it's a drop. And it's like an outrageously quick throw from a base where there's very little windup. The velocity is crazy. That's the kind of thing that Levis was doing last year, and he can do that, and that's a good thing. It's kind of a blessing and a curse that you can make up for shortcomings from a processing and a timing standpoint with outrageous, stupid arm arrogance. But ideally, that's not the way you want to operate. And results may vary when that's the way that you're conducting yourself on the football field. And so I asked Brian Callahan, his head coach, today. I said, essentially what I just told you. He makes up for some timing issues with some arm arrogance that he has. I'm sure that's not the way that you guys are wanting to operate. And so what are you guys doing to improve his timing, get him on time within this new offense, and how is that coming along? Here is what Brian Callahan had to say.
There's some timing things, like, for example, yesterday in the red zone, it might have been like the first or second time he might have repped the particular play. So it's all very new. And he was probably late on 2 or 3 throws down there on some new concepts that he hadn't banked the reps on. And so the hope is that you point it out the first time and you say, this is the timing he needs to be on. He sees where the window is when the window is open. And then you keep working on that and you keep pushing that timing, because everything about how you play football in the NFL at the quarterback spot in the drop back game is very, very heavily timing based, and your feet got to be right. The processing of what you see has to happen fast, and you got to trust what you see when you make the throw. It's the old adage, a lot of quarterbacks try to wait to see guys come open, and you're trying to anticipate when they're going to be open, and that's a maturation process for a quarterback. And so the fun part is, like, he sees it and he understands it when it's not exactly right, and then he usually makes an adjustment the next time out. And so you take a red zone play, for example, the first day he runs it, maybe it's not great and the timing's not where you want it to be. And then, we've repped it 4, 5, 6 more times before the season starts. And now you start to feel that timing, and he starts to feel it and see it. It's a rep thing. It's an experience process. And so that part's fun. I mean, that's the coaching part for me. That's where I enjoy.
And that makes a lot of sense. We heard from Tyler Boyd in the scrum availability with him right after this about, and this wasn't even along the lines of this questioning, he kind of just brought it up. Hey, the timing is paramount in this offense. It is so important. This offense does not operate the way it's supposed to unless everything is on time. And if you watched Joe Burrow and the Brian Callahan Bengals offenses the past couple of years, JT, you can test this. It is a timing and rhythm based offense. They're capable of taking the top off and making explosive plays, but the way that they really killed teams was they can dink and dunk you till the cows come home. They will go up and down the field, slicing you to death with with schemed looks that require precision placement, precision timing, and there's really nothing you can do about that. That's kind of one of Joe Burrow's superpowers. That's what has made that offense so potent in recent years. That's what they're trying to do here in Tennessee, and that's going to require Will Levis's timing to improve.
Yeah, I think for sure that timing is the biggest thing. And that's something what Brian kind of attests to right there is kind of the struggles that he had yesterday. I think it was widely reported that yesterday was not Will Levis's best day, especially.
I heard he threw a ball in the lake. That's what I was told.
He did do that. And he also,
but he didn't though. Let's not further propagate this. He threw a ball in the short area by the lake that bounced.
Over the fence, though, which is I don't know if people know,
football's not round. They sometimes take big old hops when they hit the ground. Jumped the fence and somehow it did end up in the lake. But he did not sail a ball 40 yards over a dude's head and put it in the lake. Let's make that clear.
I mean,
as some usual suspects have been pushing.
The testament, though, to how strong his arm is, though, because that fence isn't small. It's not like you're at your like neighborhood pool and you like accidentally.
No, it's like a borderline prison fence, right? It's like a prison. It's like it's like an 8-10 footer with some barbed wire on the top. Yeah, no, it's a big boy fence.
It is a big boy fence. But like to that point, like Will Levis still able to. He misses it. It comes screaming in and it bounces over the fence like that. He also does get picked off by Jack Gibbons, which the Titans did post that yesterday. Which is maybe not the best. Good look for Jack Gibbons in shorts. Not a great
huge for Jack Gibbons. The biggest for Jack Gibbons. Yeah.
I think,
but it's over. I'm afraid these are the rules. It's over.
The biggest thing,
Will Levis, pack it up. Yeah.
Will Levis did, from what you all saw today, did look a lot better, was able to bounce back today in those drills. And yesterday as well. Those 7-on-7 drills are not offensive friendly. And what Brian is talking to there as well, just some things that he hasn't banked the reps there. We were going to see that, his first or second time going through some of those design plays, probably not going to work out the best. And we just happened to see him go through those plays the first couple times. And I'm sure that when we get, with this 6 weeks of really off season, finally for these guys, I'm sure Will Levis is going to put in the work and finally have those reps and be able to put it together. And I'm sure when we come around to minicamp, or not minicamp, but
training camp,
I think we'll see a lot more, finely tuned Will Levis.
And I'm glad you steered this in the direction of like what we don't know. We're missing some information because that's a big point I'm about to make. But yes, we can go ahead and take it there. I wanted to do an honest assessment of what Will Levis's week has looked like. And I wanted to run this, not run it by you, JT, but kind of get your opinion and see if it matches mine, because we were talking about this in the press corps, walking back up to the media room after practice concluded and after media availability concluded. And it's like, what do you make of this week from Will Levis? And in terms of how is it different looking from what was going on last year, how he looked in similar situations on the practice field last year? It's not a Vrabel practice in the sense that there's a lot less running. It's much more pass heavy. We talked about that from really day one of this month's festivities. It's like, hey, they're passing the ball a lot more. Yes, but it isn't a ton of explosive plays even today when the offense was operating much more smoothly than it was yesterday. Not really. And here's the bottom line. I mentioned the usual suspects a moment ago, JT. The usual suspects. This is going to be the running line on a lot of the certain shows and publications around town that love the Levis threw a ball in the lake crowd. This is what they're going to run with today. It's going to be Mason Rudolph was significantly better than Will Levis on the last day of minicamp. And in a viciously no context way, that is true. I'm not going to sugarcoat what I saw. Like Mason Rudolph, significantly is probably a strong word, but it was clear that Mason Rudolph had a better day today than Will Levis did. Now, did Levis have a better day than he had yesterday? Yes. Did they all have a better day than they had yesterday? Yes. But was it clear that Mason had the best day and then Will had the best day and then Malik the worst day? That was the case today. And so, and I was talking to PK about this afterwards, in trying to put our finger on how you assess him this week. Was it bad? No. But we talked to some of the coaches yesterday about like a year 2 leap. And we talk a lot this offseason about how, a full offseason for Will Levis. He's got NFL experience under his belt. Year two leaps for quarterbacks tend to be a significant thing. Like they come in guns a-blazing, and sometimes they look like completely different guys. Can Will Levis be that? Yes. Was that the case? Was that what we saw from him this week? In my opinion, not really. It wasn't worse than it was, and you could argue it maybe a tinge better than what I saw from practice Will Levis in 2023. Sure. But was it like a year two leap? Like, oh, here we go. Here's a guy. Not really. Now, JT, I want you to speak to that. And then I want to explain not really a devil's advocate argument in his defense, but kind of the context you're not going to get on these shows that are going to take this and run with it and make it very clickbaity and very angry in June for no reason. Some context that required. But first, the 2 days you were there, JT, is that kind of where you're at on Will Levis, or did you see something different?
I think the context for me is that, looking back at what the second round of OTAs Will Levis was and looking at what a minicamp Levis was, is still a guy who is, like he said, weirdly tweaking with things because he's weird. And,
Bingo.
With no pads, like it's going to come down to the biggest thing here. I think we can have a lot better discussion about Will Levis, the quarterback, when the pads go on and when we're going full speed. Like right now, you're looking at things that should not look exactly right, because this is, if there were any time in an NFL season to tinker with these things and things not look quite right for a quarterback, I think right now is exactly the spot. There's not, you shouldn't always have to be your 100%, right? There are always things that you can work on, and working on those things is not going to, have the best results come in May and June. I'd rather him, have these up and down days, and then when we get to training camp, start to see that put together. So because he's not putting it together now when there's no pads on is not a huge concern for me. But if we get into a week or two of training camp and we're still seeing the same up and downs and tweaks and mechanics, and that's what we're still hearing from the coaching staff and from Levis himself, that's when you can start to feel a little bit more concerned about Levis taking that year two jump to being a more productive quarterback.
I agree completely. And that's essentially that's one of the two very big contextual elements of this that matter. And that's essentially what I told the PK. I said, listen, like today on June 6th, is that super concerning to me? Not really. But if it's August 17th and this is what it looks like, then I'm going to have some significant questions. I'm going to have some real concerns. And along the lines of tweaking, like that's where I really feel like we don't have enough information. I want to know more, because if he had really, or one of his coaches had really come out full-throated with their chest and been like, listen, he is working on some stuff right now. It is all for the better. It's to improve. It is things that are necessary. It's this with his mechanics or his arm angle or his stance, his footwork, whatever it is. If they'd come out and been like, he's going, it's like, like many things in life, I equate it to golf. And like when I'm trying to learn a new club, or I'm trying to, I usually hit a draw. I'm trying to learn how to hit a fade. In anything that you do in life, you can apply this to. When you try something new, when you're doing something a different way than you know how to do it, there is significant, like you got to figure it out. There's trial and error. There are going to be some learning curve elements to getting up to speed and being as good as you once were. I'm not saying that's the case. And then that's that's why Will Levis was bad this week. No, but is that a possibility? Yeah, totally. I mean, they alluded to him going through a number of changes and trying some new things. And so that's going to result in some passes being thrown a little bit behind or being sailed or being low. And Kenneth brings up the other thing in here, talking about the timing, going back to the timing in the comments. He says timing and ball placement. A play that sticks in my mind is a play that was a touchdown. He threw a pass way late behind Hopkins, but Hopkins bailed him out by reaching behind him to grab it and then scored. I know the play that you're talking about, Kenneth. That is a decent example of the kind of thing I'm talking about. Another thing from today's training camp, one of the plays that ended up being a touchdown was a wide open chig lined up in the slot, runs up the seam. It was a touchdown, but it was a little bit late, a little bit underthrown and a little bit behind him. had to kind of contort his body and turn around mid-run to make the catch, but he was so wide open it didn't matter. And that's there were elements of today that really, I think, attested to Brian Callahan scheming these cats up. He's getting these cats open because there was a lot of really open looks. The execution of those open looks was hit or miss, but these guys were getting open. And so that's good, but like this pass to Chig would not have been a touchdown. It may not have been a completion if he had anybody in his vicinity when the ball is thrown his way. And so you take that into account, you take the tinkering into account, you take into account, like Callahan said in that video we just showed, hey, he is doing things right now that he may be doing for the first time, executing plays that he just learned for the first or second time, the timing of which he either doesn't have down pat yet, or I'm still like, he doesn't know it yet. And I'm having to tell him, okay, here's when you do this, here, then where and why. Like I'm giving him the detailed notes, the 401 class as we go. And so you're seeing the learning process, not the finished product. That all of those things may very well be the case. And to some extent, I think they are. But it's really impossible for us to say how much of an impact that is, I think. And it's impossible for us to completely dismiss the fact that it was not a year two leap kind of week. It was underwhelming in that regard. And so that's something to at least, I don't think it's something to panic over. Again, it's June 6th. Let's get to August 6th before we start to really have this conversation in earnest. But it is something to keep an eye on. And I'm curious to see as he, like you said, has the next 6 weeks to get it in his body and in his mind, really knowing something like the back of his hand. When you had to take Spanish in high school, I think you may have even if you got to a point where you felt like you could speak in Spanish, you had to sit there and really think about it. Like you learn a new language. It takes a while before it becomes second nature, before you know it like the back of your hand. I'd imagine it's exactly the same when you're having to learn a new offense. And even when you know it, you don't really know it until you stack where you bank reps. And so let's let him get to that point before we start to full blown freak out.
Yeah, I think the last little piece of that is something that we also heard, I think, either from Brian Callahan or his offensive coordinator, Nick Holtz, earlier this week, in the fact that, the things where, Will Levis isn't exactly acting on instinct yet, right? It's still just this very much learning period for him. We're still installing
mechanical.
It's not the install has happened, but it's not fully in everybody's system yet. And that's what you're working through during these OTAs and mini camps. And that's what he's going to continue to work on. And so, yeah, we should wait for all judgments, I think, on most of these players until we get to that training camp. But it is an interesting look inside this, I guess you could call a quarterback battle that really isn't, because I think Mason Rudolph, that's kind of why they brought him in there, because if things were to not work out, that you should be glad that you have a guy like Mason Rudolph waiting in the wings, who is having stringing together good practices and is.
Well, now hang on. Brian Callahan said today that it's a quarterback competition, Malik or Mason Rudolph. We don't know yet.
Exactly, right? Yes.
We're going to find out, because that's true.
And maybe that's why he's stringing those days together. Mason Rudolph better have like 4 or 5 good days. Otherwise, here comes Malik. So
I'm going to allow Tyler Boyd to transition us here. And this clip from him is on the topic of what he has seen from Will Levis from a development and improvement standpoint, even in just this spring session so far.
You talking about Will? Yeah, I think it's a learning process for everybody. It's not just him. He's a second-year guy. Even the receivers, hot-bred, they still got to learn the offense. That's what I think the good addition is with me. I can kind of help them guys on the field. We got a great receivers coach in Tyke, but you might brain fart a little bit and you might not know what you're doing. And the good thing is I'm here. I can kind of navigate guys on the field and tell them what they got. So it's kind of a win-win. For guys that's learning while I'm out there. Because I'm used to the offense. I know exactly how he wants it done and how it ran. So I think it just help guys just progress.
How much faster.
Is he?
Hey, you made it to the end of the video. Thanks for that.
Want more of the latest from the Hot Read podcast? Subscribe to the channel right below.
And follow us on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram @HotReadPod for even more segments, clips, and announcements.